All right, Gordy, I'm going to start where I should start every podcast, but I've never started one this way before. And that was, what was your morning routine this morning? How did you wake up? When did you wake up? How'd you wake up? What did you do for the first hour? Did you eat breakfast? Like, break it down for us.
I want to try and impress and tell you how I had a miracle morning, but I have to tell you that I sat on the throne for a solid 20 minutes.
Okay. Wow. All right.
I,
I
uh,
love the
I,
transparency.
yeah. Funny enough, I get a lot of my like priming for the day done on the throne, aka
Mm,
the toilet. So I just look over my calendar, what I'm going to be doing today. Is there anything I want to clear up? And then if there's any urgent emails or anything that I need to delegate, I get that taken care of. And then I have, I've one of the things that I've developed is a 7-minute meditation. It's called a
mm.
magic meditation. So I do
Okay.
that in the morning. It's like, me being kind of like a hacker. I figured like, how do I develop a meditation that gets me into a state in the shortest amount of time? So I
Yeah.
do this 7-minute meditation. It's called magic meditation. We can share that with your community.
Yeah.
And then I had this morning. Usually I'll have like a black coffee, but then this morning I had a bulletproof coffee. So I had some grass-fed butter in it because I wanted to prolong sort of like my cognitive faculties, because I wanted to show up for you in this
Yeah.
conversation and seem to be smarter than I am. So yeah, and then I came to the office. I'm listening to an audiobook right now by Dr. Becky called Good Inside.
Okay.
And it's a book on parenting. That's one of the areas that I'm really focused on right now, is this
Mm.
daily like journey of how to be a better father, how to be more present for my children, and continue to do the work there. And so I was listening to that, came to the office, filled up my massive mug of water and with a heart on it, to remind me
Nice.
for love. And then I got ready for this.
Amazing. I appreciate that. That breakdown. And so, what time did you wake up, by the way?
Usually I'm up between 8 and 9, but I go to
Okay.
sleep late as well. So
Yeah.
I go to sleep at like 1:32. So I'm embarrassed to say that because you're the 5 a.m.,
Dude,
6
so
a.m.
here's what I'm doing. I'm on a post-it note right now. I'm writing Gordy Bal, and I'm
Yeah.
sticking it to a hardcover copy of The Miracle Morning. I'm gonna get that in the mail to you.
Yes.
We're gonna up level, but no, man.
Yeah.
I always say that there's no one wrong or right way. It's like you figure out what works for you, and you've been extremely effective in your life. So, but thanks for not sugarcoating that, not trying to make it extra impressive, just being real. So
Yeah.
here's where I want to start. And you and I were just talking, by the way, before I say where I want to start. I feel like we need to do like a Joe Rogan. I think we have about 45 minutes right now. I want to do a Joe Rogan 3-hour deep dive with you. Like as I'm reading your book, The New Millionaire's Playbook, which in full transparency, I don't know if I told you this, but I didn't love the title. It wasn't that I
Yeah.
didn't love the title, but I had just interviewed somebody on my podcast, Garrett Gunderson, about money, a money topic.
Yeah.
And then like right after that, Akira Chan, our mutual friend, emailed or texted me and said, "Hey, I've got this friend. He's brilliant. Gordy Bal. Would you have him on your show?" He wrote this book called The New Millionaire's Playbook. I'm like, I just had a guy about money. But dude, I got a copy of your book in the mail, and it's not about money. Like it's about elevating consciousness. And you talk about, the government and preparing, and you talk about your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And this book is a buffet, both broad and deep in terms of the information that you cover. And that's why I feel like I'll probably have you back on here, this summer, like in the next month or so we can go a lot deeper. Yeah, man. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Thank you
So
for
here's where I want
the
to start, just so people can get to know you a little bit. So your background is very diverse, and at 15, you dove deep into the world of internet marketing. That was kind of your start. Like I was a DJ at 15 on the radio, so I was DJing, much less financial upside. You you were diving into internet marketing, and then now I know you said in the book that it was in 2015 in a deep state of vision questing, which, by the way, I'd love for you to even elaborate on what vision questing is for our audience. And I'm asking for a friend, of course. But you realize that what our planet needs is conscious thought revolution. And your goal became to measurably accelerate the evolution of consciousness. And so you shut down all your business operations that weren't dedicated to that mission. So my question for you is, what is the realization that you had? Like, how'd you come to that? And what is a conscious thought revolution?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, growing up to immigrant parents that moved from India to Canada, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And I've always had this innate curiosity about like, what are we really here for? What's behind the veil? What is life? What is existence really about? And as a kid, the meaning that I made was, well, it must be to make a lot of money.
Mm.
That's going to solve all the problems. And so, being a kid of the internet, I was lucky. I found inefficiencies in the digital marketplace, and started developing technology that would conduct what's called arbitrage, which is called ad. So what I would do is buy traffic from specific ad engines and then sell them to other ad engines, and then there would be a margin. And then I was already starting to look at things like psychographic profiles to understand human psychology. How do you
Mm.
help them, click an ad at a higher rate? And it was like extremely lucrative. And there was a point, like, I was generating 6 figures a day, which as a kid I was like, holy shit, like, is this even possible? And now that I've kind of
Even
figured
as
out
an
the
adult, I think that most of us would have that reaction. But
yeah, well, I know
yeah,
it's
but
yeah, it
especially
was
as a 15-year-old kid, man, that's wild.
yeah. So and then so I mean, 15 is when I got started. That's not when I
Okay.
was generating. It was in my
Okay.
20s that I started
Got it.
generating like the 6 figures.
That kind of,
And
yeah.
yeah, and then I ended up buying the domain ctr.com. So I spent like 100+ grand to buy that domain, because I thought I was clever and I was going to build a software platform to help digital advertisers increase their click-through rate. So I'd build this
CTR's click-through rate. Got it.
That's right. In digital advertising and marketing, it's a success metric. It's one of the key success metrics. So the higher your click-through rate, the better your ads and your campaigns perform. And so I started, going on that whole path and this journey. And then I just found myself extremely depressed. I went through this massive existential crisis. I was like, I thought making a bunch of money was going to help me be happy and healthy. My family's going to be happy. Like, the world's all of a sudden, I'm going to be able to make it better. And I'm just realizing nothing's getting better. I'm unhealthy. I'm unhappy. I don't even want to get out of bed.
Mm.
And so I started really asking some of these deeper questions. First, it was more around like, how does the world actually work? What is the three-dimensional structure by which we all live and are governed by? What is power? What is politics? What is healthcare? What is education? What is the financial system? Like, how did all of these systems come into existence that we're all sort of living and abiding by? And when I went deep down that rabbit hole, I kind of came to this realization that, we're playing a game that's rigged. And the
Mm.
game is rigged in a way where a select few benefit at the cost of everybody else and the planet.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what the hell? Like, why am I contributing to this game? Why am I playing this game? And that actually got me even more depressed. I'm like, this is not a game I want to be playing.
Wow.
And so that's what led me to this more of a vision questing, which is really, understanding who you are. What is your
Mm.
purpose? Why am I really here? And so instead of asking questions of how does the world work, I started asking questions of who am I? What is the nature of reality? Like, how does reality actually get rendered?
Mm.
What are the mechanisms by which reality is forming itself through our lens, and how are we co-creating that? What is human consciousness? And so in 2015, when I was in a deep state of vision quest and a deep meditation, I got this unbelievably clear message that I still feel today. It was like my face was being held, and it was like this clear message that was, we don't need a higher click-through rate. What we need is a conscious thought revolution.
Mm.
And which was so funny, because then my CTR.com went from click-through
Yeah.
rate to conscious thought revolution.
Wow.
And to your question of what is a conscious thought revolution? Well, really, it's a call to action to wake up and
Mm.
really understand that our thoughts are the most powerful currency we have to invest. Where and how we invest our thoughts is more important than where and how we invest our dollars. And according to a Stanford study that was done a few years ago, we as humans are having between 40 and 60,000 thoughts a day. And we're not even aware of 95% of these thoughts. And
Yeah.
so where and how are these thoughts operating? And most of them are in our unconscious and subconscious. So when they're in our unconscious and subconscious, they're helping govern and shape our reality in a way that actually isn't from our soul. It isn't from a higher state of our being. And so when you begin to bring conscious awareness to these thoughts, and you actually, instead of your thoughts having you're able to have your thoughts, you can actually architect your reality in a whole different way. You can become like the magician or the, the wizard of your reality, because you can use your thoughts as the Lego blocks of your reality. And so that's what a conscious thought revolution is. And that then morphed into sort of, you brought up how I had this like massive moment where I realized that, this rigged game that I was observing, I
Yeah.
was an active participant in it. I was actually, I was pointing fingers outward and saying, they're screwing up the world and they're using power and money to hoard and control. And then I had to look in the mirror. I was like, oh shit, I'm doing that. Here I am helping, affiliate marketers and unconscious advertisers just help people sell more shit that people don't even need and isn't in their benefit. So I had this moment where, and I was so fortunate. My wife, she's just always had my back. And I said, like, I think I need to shut everything down. This is no longer congruent for me. And I was nervous and I was worried. All my advisors, like my business friends or people that I was in masterminds with, they're like, Gordy, you don't want to do that. You need cash flow. You need money.
Yeah.
This is, and I said, and my wife said to me, she's like, babe, if we need to live in a tent for a few years, we got this. And for me, that's all I needed to hear. And so in December of 2017, I went to my business partners and I said, hey, if you want to continue on this journey, you're more than welcome to. I'm no longer going to be doing this. I'm going to shut everything down. If you want to take it on, you can take it on. And both of them looked at me and said, dude, we're in. Like, we're in for what, like, we've been watching your journey and we know you're onto something and we're in. And here's where the crazy part happened. That was the first week of December in 2017. 2 days later, one of my business partners, who's been investing in a lot of our profits into crypto since 2014, it was like a set and forget strategy. So we never even thought about it. He's like, oh, Gordy, by the way, did you know that crypto that we were investing, it's worth like tens of millions of dollars. It was like a crazy amount. And it's just like, it was one of those moments where it's like the universe had your back. Like the universe was like, step into your truth. I got your back. And that basically allowed for the next, few years to reorganize, pivot and reorient ourselves to this new organization, which is CTR now, which was, launching a fund, a growth fund and a venture fund to invest in entrepreneurs and technologies that are dedicated to measurably raise consciousness. And so how do you use data to actually measurably improve mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being? And I talk about the crazy story of how I met these guys. Do you know Aura, the smart ring?
Yeah.
So after I developed that thesis, I met the CEO through some serendipitous occurrence, and we ended up striking a deal. We invested like $1 million into them when they were worth, they were a tiny company nobody knew of. They were worth around $20 million. Fast forward today, they're worth over $2.5 billion. And we're able to go back to our investors and say, hey, not only did you just make a massive return on your investment, but more importantly, look what happens when you put your money to actually help people's well-being. And so then we ended up launching, like, raising over $10 million and investing in some really epic companies and founders that, and it's allowed me to really change the game of venture capital. Because after I dove into the world of venture capital, man, talk about unconsciousness.
Yeah. It's really just bottom line, right? It's like, oh, okay, so what's your return on it? Okay, great. So we're going to invest, right? That's it. They're just looking at the dollars.
That's it. And the part that made me the most sad was seeing how founders are being treated. They're just being treated as pieces of like something that can be that can be extracted from. And so I've kind of developed this reputation in the founder world where my first question isn't what are the numbers? My first question is like, how are you feeling? What's going on for you today? Like, what's really going on? And when you see like the nervous system all of a sudden go from like fight or flight to like parasympathetic, they just feel so much more open. And then they're able to actually operate at a different level. Because what I've discovered is our business is a byproduct of our state of consciousness. And so if there's shit we're not working on inside of ourselves, it shows up in our business in some way. And so that's why the real work that I've discovered is what we're talking about. It's like this is what I get your point about like the name of, I use it as a Trojan horse, the new Millionaire's Playbook. Sure. It's not about money. Really, it's about redefining wealth. And the new millionaire is somebody that isn't trying to chase millions of dollars, but rather positively impacting millions of lives. lives.
Yeah.
And firstly, by discovering their true purpose, connecting back to their soul, and realizing what they're really here for, and then measuring their MEPS. I call it MEPS: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. So you actually have
Yeah.
KPIs to measure these areas that are indicative of your state of consciousness, and then using that as a force for good. And so that's, and as we're having, $70 trillion of wealth move from the boomer generation to millennials and Gen Z, this wealth transfer is looking for a new kind of energy. It's looking for a new kind of consciousness. And
Mm.
so it's incumbent upon people like us to do the work to become stewards and shepherd this massive amount of wealth. And that requires a new game to play.
Yeah. Man, so many directions that we could go. So, and I want to talk about the economy and stuff, but let's start with the consciousness piece.
Yeah.
The Can you talk it like in simple terms? Explain it to me as if I'm a third grader. What is human consciousness? Like, how would you define it? And the reason I'm asking is, my mission, the Miracle Morning mission, is to elevate the consciousness of humanity one morning at a time. And I originally it was change 1 million lives one morning at a time. And then when we reached 1 million people, I'm like, well, I have to, is it now going to be 1 billion? But I thought, in fact, it was a moment of vision questing. I don't call it that, but it was like a deep meditation when I got, Hal, the Miracle Morning elevates a person's consciousness. And if we are getting millions of people to start every day in a peak MEPS, physical, but I call it physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. PIES is my acronym, PIES, right? So yeah, you and I are just soul brothers, dude. But anyway, then as we elevate our own consciousness and we're doing it at scale, then one person, one morning at a time, the consciousness of humanity is being elevated. However, whenever I talk about that mission, I always have to kind of explain, like, well, okay, well, what is human consciousness? How do you define that? And there are different ways of defining it, But so I'd love to hear your definition. Is you're on this mission for this conscious thought revolution. What is human consciousness in a way that we can all understand?
Yeah. Well, there's one way that's ununderstandable. So I'm going to quickly touch upon that, and then I'll get into the more pragmatic. So consciousness in itself is actually a bit of a triggering word in a lot of spaces and places because it's hard to grasp. And it's we're using language to try and describe something that is unlanguageable. It's like the infinity of the universe, or all of existence. There is no language is finite, but all of existence is infinite. So to even put words to something like that in itself, and whether you in your own lexicon you call that God, or you call that spirit, or you call that universe, like there is no word that can encapsulate that. So that's the first thing I just want to say.
I appreciate that.
In a more pragmatic, practical way, really, your state of consciousness is your state of awareness.
Yes.
How aware are you in this moment?
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, not yesterday, right here, right now. Even if you're listening to this, how aware are you? How aware are you of your thoughts? How aware are you of your body, your system, your nervous system? And how do you get more aware? What are the ways in which you can bring more awareness? And awareness can be expanded. It can be expanded infinitely. But part of our human condition is we're contracted because of all of our programming, all of our trauma, and our nervous system is in sympathetic for most of the day. So we're always in fight or fight. We're thinking of what we have to do after this call, what we had to do before. And so in order for us to raise our consciousness, it's really the ability to slow down time. Part of that is actually using your breath. Even in this moment right here, as you're listening, just slow your breath down and take a deeper breath. And as you do that, your experience of experience shapeshifts. And you can start noticing different things. Maybe a part of it in the back of your head, there'll be a tingle. Maybe you'll notice there's a sensation in your body. And so you can become curious around these things. And so this is your state of consciousness in any given moment. And the way you react, whether it's inside of relationship to somebody else or even a relationship to yourself, the way in which we can improve that is by raising our own consciousness and becoming more aware. And part of the work there is to excavate and look at all the parts that are present inside of you that are not conscious. Some, Carl Jung, famous psychologist, called this your shadow.
Yeah.
And so, and this is hard work because your shadow does not want to be seen. And sometimes when you have to look at it, it's extremely uncomfortable because you face all these aspects of yourself that are still playing their role out in different places. And only can you heal them by looking at them and then integrating them and welcoming them, because your
Yeah.
ego or your shadow is operating alongside you all day every day, and in a lot of ways it's maladaptive. It's a way that isn't in your highest interest. It's not in the highest interest of your soul. And so this is why I call it MEPS, because those are what I've discovered as 4 indicators. These are 4 levers that we can pull to measurably raise our consciousness. First, again, is mental. So how do we assess our mental well-being? Well, first and foremost is just look at the quality and depth of our thoughts.
Mm.
Are our thoughts empowering us, or are they disempowering us? And if you actually audit your thoughts, and if you had like a Fitbit, which is something I want to invest in. So if you know anybody that has a Fitbit that can measure your thoughts, that's
Nice.
something super cool.
Okay.
So you can audit your thoughts and start seeing, like, are they empowering or disempowering? And then emotional wellness is like, okay, am I actually feeling my emotions? Or am I numbing them? Am I even aware of what emotion is present? And especially for a lot of men, we've been conditioned and trained not to feel emotions. If we feel
Sure.
emotions, we're weak.
Yeah.
But what happens is they end up getting backlogged, and they
Yep.
become some kind of, using a computer analogy, they become like a virus, or they become code that's no more uh, supportive for our well-being. And then physical, I mean, that one's easy and has become really powerful over the last 5 years with our friends like Dave Asprey, who's come
Yeah.
out with biohacking, ways to look at all the biometric data to see, like, am I using my body as a vessel for my soul, or am I just using it as something that I can beat up and use to go dirt bike riding. And then the last is spiritual wellness. And what does that mean? Well, the way I look at that is really the depth and quality of your connection to yourself,
Mm.
to others, and to the natural world. And so if you're not connected to yourself or others with depth and like reality, and you're still occupying many masks, then it's going to be hard to really have a connection that's beyond the superficial three-dimensional. So this is part of why in my venture fund, I'm continuously looking for entrepreneurs and technologies that are building tools and technologies to measure these things, because if you can improve mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, those are all indicative of a higher state of consciousness.
Mm. 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 I love that explanation. And the first word that you shared, consciousness, is awareness. That's how I always describe elevating your consciousness, is elevating how aware and intentional you are, which to me, the two go hand in hand, because when you become more aware of how your thoughts, your words, and your actions are impacting you and the people around you, then it's hard to turn a blind eye to that. Like you almost automatically, intention follows. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I've never realized I was thinking those thoughts, those disempowering thoughts, or treating my spouse this way. Or now that I'm aware, intention naturally follows. I want to be more intentional about how I think and how I act and what I say, and so on and so forth.
You're
Um,
so amazing at, like, bringing it down. Like,
mm,
I feel like I stay too much in the ether, and it sometimes is hard to grasp. I feel like you've done such a great job in making it accessible for everybody. and
mm,
and what you just described, I'd say there's one piece in the middle of
mm,
awareness and intention as well. It's attention. And so
mm,
it's like awareness, and then and attention is like the light, now the light, the flashlight. And then we get to actually see where are we putting our attention now that we have expanded awareness. And
mm.
then we get to use intention to bring forth what it is that our soul or our spirit or our greater self wants to bring. And so I'm feeling a lot of gratitude for, like, I'm like, man, I need to, like, figure out how to say this in your way, because it's way I'm here, I am, like, you're like, talk to me like I'm 6 years old, and I'm talking to you like you're like this 80-year-old sage. I'm like, yeah, that might not work.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And you just put that really well, that in between awareness and intention is attention. And when you first said that, my first thought was, well, no. Attention and awareness are the same thing. That was my internal immediate response. But then as you explained it, and I'll use my superpower is simplifying things. Like I've realized that throughout my life. It's like taking concepts that are complex and hard to understand and simplifying them. It's like, hey, here's ABC 1, 2, 3. Here's how you do it. So with attention, here's what came up for me, which is awareness is, oh, wow, I'm doing this, or I'm not doing this. However, it's real easy to go from awareness to, man, that sucks. Anyway, back to norm, back to doing the same old thing, right? So attention is now I'm going to take my consciousness and like that flashlight, I'm going to choose to shine it on that awareness that just emerged during my magic meditation or miracle morning or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, now I'm consciously choosing where to focus my attention. I'm going to focus on this thing that I became aware of, and how can I get better at this thing? Or I'm going to understand deeper where I'm not showing up and how I'm not being my best self. All right. And the amount of attention I invest on the thing I became aware of then will fuel the intention to make a difference. Right. Yeah, and if anybody's listening, like, think about it. If you only put attention on it for 6 seconds or 5 seconds, you're not fueling your intention with enough fuel to really make a change in your life. Right.
Wow. Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, I'm going to rewatch this just so I can extract that. And you said it perfectly.
There you go, man. Yeah, and if you want, just to repeat, for me, it's elevating your consciousness means becoming more aware and intentional about how your thoughts, words, and actions impact you and the people around you. That's how I define elevating consciousness. So yeah, there you go, dude. We have a lot to learn from each other. So this, like I said, we had a lot to talk about. In fact, I know you're coming to Austin for a mastermind that we're going to be at. And I do think you and I need to get another like an hour-long call, just the two of us. And either before, after, or get together during, but yeah, we'll figure it out. But man, I'm aware now of how much Gordy, you and I need to connect more, which you've already said. So I'm going to put more attention on that and intention to make sure that we do that. So yeah, I just made it public for everybody listening. I want to shift gears a little bit. Like we could go, we've got another 15 minutes and we could go down this same path that we're going on, talking about the importance of, you talk about thinking your own thoughts and that's about being intentional and about what you think. And that you said earlier that our thoughts are something, how do you say it about are the greatest currency that we have or something like that?
That's right. Yeah. Our thoughts are the most powerful currency we have. So where and how we invest them. So
we could spend all day there, but there's a topic that I want to talk about that I think is really relevant for people right now. I saw your 10-minute talk for Genius Network. I mentioned that to you. I was watching it today. And anybody that hasn't seen that, by the way, go to YouTube and type in Gordy Bal, GordyBal. I think for me, it was the first or second video that came up. But it's, or you can type in Gordy Bal 10-minute talk or Genius Network talk, but that's what you're looking for. It's a phenomenal message. And you answered the question, how do we create a life in a world that is not dependent on the government or banks? And so here's where I want to start. I've heard you say that our recession right now, that we are in relatively early stages of, and it could become a depression. And I think that everybody listening, most people listening are probably feeling that. They might be feeling it in their pocketbook, their income, their bank account. I think that collective consciousness right now, we're aware like, man, something's off. And we don't feel like we're heading in a great direction right now as a country, the global recession. There's just, everybody I think is feeling it. And so specifically, I've seen somewhere that you said the rate of inflation is 8.6% right now. So if you're listening, think about this. That means that if you and I aren't earning at least 8.6% on our money right now, we are losing purchasing power. $1 today is worth less tomorrow, less the next day, less next week, next month. So I wanted to ask you, what do you recommend people do to combat inflation? Let's just like start there. I know in the Genius Network talk, you share 4 things that you're doing. What are some of those things that people can consider, research further, and apply?
Yeah, I mean, you just nailed it. This idea that if we're not earning at least 8.6% interest on our money, we're actually losing money. And
Yeah.
so first and foremost is really finding ways to generate yield. So if you already have savings or investments, take a look at what your annual yield is. And if it's not at least 8.6%, you need to find other options.
Mm,
And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is every single one of us have an opportunity to create our own bank.
mm,
That sounds crazy, but what I mean by this is as this 70 plus trillion dollars moves hands over the next few years, it's looking for outlets for where it can serve a higher purpose. And so you, as an example, can go and launch, the Miracle Bank. And all that means is a pool of money. A fund, so to speak. Like I can walk you through a model where you can create the Miracle Fund, and then all of the people that are aligned with you can deposit their money into the Miracle Fund, including yourself. And I
mm.
would invest in that one. And
Okay.
then now all of a sudden, instead of bankers just going and, doing fractional reserve and going lending it out to make their money, you can decide with your community. And this is key, is working together with community. We need to come back together with community and not just live in our solo sort of, bubbles. But you get to now deploy that money with community into projects that not only make impact, but are designed to win financially. And so the perfect example I give is like the Aura deal that we had set up. Like when we invested in Aura, what we did is we set up our own fund bank, and we brought in our community. So people that are, health and wellness influencers, people that are able to help increase the sales of this company that we really believed in. And so not only were they able to generate ongoing yield from, say, affiliate commissions, so they were generating cash flow. So all of our biohacker friends and sort of our friends in the wellness space, they were promoting Aura, and they were promoting it with integrity because it's a legit product that actually helps, and they were generating cash from that. Plus their investment into the fund, the bank, increased exponentially. So that's an example of ways in which people like us have the opportunity to play with capital in a different way. Instead of going and putting it in your Wells Fargo account and letting them make massive amount of money while you lose it, let's innovate. Let's come together as community. Let's develop a thesis. Different community leaders will have different theses based on how they wish to express their movement of money. And so I think that's going to be really key. And the thing around the community is really important. It's like, things are, I hate to say it, and I'm the eternal optimist, but
Mm,
things are about to get really ugly and weird over the next few
mm,
years. Like
yeah.
these last few years was just a trial run. Like this whole fiat currency game, and
Yeah.
it's the largest Ponzi scheme that's ever been created,
Yeah.
and it's on its last legs. This is why you're seeing a lot of like weird things happening in geopolitical landscape, and where there's these large power grab opportunities that are happening because they are trying their hardest to maintain as much power and control, and they're also trying to control the narrative. So when you hear things like, put trillions of dollars towards carbon credits and climate change and DEI, and which is
Diversity,
equity,
equity, and inclusion.
inclusion. Exactly. And although philosophically these sound great, if you look under the hood, it's the
Yeah.
same power players that are using these to pander to the next generation. But it's this, if you look at like, so, to name our, brilliant Bill Gates as an example, he has now become the largest landowner in the United States over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Farmland
And so,
specifically.
what's that? Sorry?
Farmland specifically.
Farmland,
Yeah.
exactly. And so and so you have, when you start looking at these things and you start noticing that on one hand there's this specific narratives being pushed out around carbon and climate, and then you look at the same players that are accumulating for private use the largest
Yeah.
amount of farmland, you can see what's happening in the game that's being played. And I think it's really important for us to like ensure that we're being protected, like, you know. And we will probably see another situation, whether it'll be like some kind of global cyber attack. You will probably
Yeah.
see something like that in the next couple of years, because what's going to happen, and we'll touch back on this in a couple of years and you'll be like, oh man, I should have listened to that. But there, what's going to happen is there's going to be a switch over from fiat currency to digital currency, and it's going to be some kind of central bank digital currency that
Sure.
is going to be government controlled. And it's really important for us to have the, and this is why I love like crypto and blockchain, because people like us have the opportunity to create our own currency. And in order to do that, we need to have our community, we need to put, whether it's get our own farmland, or as communities we bring together our own piece of land and property and grow our own food, and actually start learning some of the ways in which we can live off grid. So if a
Yeah.
cyber attack, like when the COVID thing happened, like there was, I don't know, was it like 2 or 4 weeks or something, everybody was on lockdown. Like
Yeah.
that was a trial run. Wait till this, whether it's a cyber attack or some kind of nuclear threat or whatever, will be used as the
They'll find a
final
reason.
kind of
Sure.
push. Exactly. And so we
Yeah.
got to protect ourselves. And I know I'm like the last thing, I'm not a prepper, but the truth is it's going to be important to have that. And it's not just toilet paper we're going to need.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that prepper's it's become like conspiracy theorist. Like if you ask questions, you're a conspiracy theorist, or I'm a thoughtful human being that doesn't just trust whatever you say. If you prepare, you're a prepper. Like, or I'm a dad who wants to look out for my family and make sure that they're protected in the worst case scenario. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I want to circle back to the one of the things in terms of what people can do, and I will say this: I'm gonna call out that I do think you were speaking a little bit high level there in forming our
Yeah.
own bank and this and that. So
Yeah.
I wanna bring it back to something you said in the Genius Network talk, which is you talked about precious metals.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's an important piece. If anybody, is wondering, what do I do with all my cash in the bank? Diversifying, putting a percentage in Bitcoin, right? And I'm not a financial advisor. Like, let's throw that disclaimer up there, right? But putting a percentage in crypto, even if it's a small percentage, putting a percentage in precious metals, right? Gold and silver have stood the test of time, and they have real usefulness. So unlike paper currency, that's just the fiat currency experiment that you talked about, that's on its last leg. So getting some precious metals, transferring some of our and by the way, keep in mind, I've been following gold for years, and for years people have said, hey, to keep up with inflation, to be able to protect your wealth, buy gold. And while the value of the dollar over the last year or many years, but right, it's continued to go down. Gold is at an all-time high. So if anybody would have listened to those people saying, hey, invest in precious metals, and it's not to get rich. You don't buy precious metals because it's gonna 10x, right? Like Bitcoin might. You buy precious metals to protect your wealth, because it's not going to, have the same consequence as inflation. In fact, it typically does better as it is now. Anyway, so I just want to throw out a couple of practical tips that you gave in that Genius Network talk for people, right? Invest in precious metals. I'd encourage, potentially getting some crypto, but I always say, only as much as you're willing to lose in terms of crypto, right? Because it could go to zero, right? There's a lot of reasons that it won't, and financial institutions now that are even mainstream are investing, but it's an unknown. It's very much an unknown, and so I listen to the financial folks that say, hey, only invest as much in Bitcoin as you're willing to lose, because we don't know. But any thoughts on the precious metals? Anything to add on precious metals, crypto, and even real estate? Obviously, is a great way to store value.
Yeah, for precious metals, you want to have a couple different ways to invest. One is to actually have physical large amounts that you can put into a safe, or some kind of third party that'll hold it for you. There's different places in the U.S. and Canada that do that for you. But you actually, again, like I risk sounding like a prepper, which is not a bad thing, as you pointed out. But actually having small denominations like coins.
Yes. For barter.
On hand will be important, because if say the grid has gone down and you need to transact, that'll be the way that people will transact. And back in the day, the dollar was backed by gold, and now it's not. So that's why gold is still valuable. And then on the crypto side of things, I think it's really important to know, and to your point, yes, like, don't go all in, because it's extremely volatile and
Yeah.
it's extremely nascent. But at the same time, just realize that we are going to be moving to a fully digital currency in the next few years.
Yeah.
And right now, if you look at the total global supply of just money, and you look at the relative amount of global market cap of crypto, I believe it's 15 to 20 times more still to go. So that just means that the digital currency version, so even if you put it in Bitcoin, which will get opted in by CBDC anyway, you still have 15 times to go up in your investment. So whether that's going to take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I think it still will be choppy over the next couple of years, but it's
Yeah.
a good way to protect yourself, because if you're sitting on just cash and dollars, like literal dollar bills, those
Yeah.
are going to be worthless. Like, you might as well use that for toilet paper in a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's headed, and hyperinflation. And I've studied hyperinflation, which we won't. That's a whole nother can of worms. But that's where, all of a sudden, it might cost you $1,000 to buy a gallon of milk, and then it
Yep.
might cost you $10,000 6 months later to buy that same gallon of milk. And that's happened in every country where they've printed money at the rate that we have. And so it is a very realistic possibility. And to your point, we have to, unplug from this matrix. You talk a lot in the book about unplugging from the matrix, and that we've got to, we have to, either you're going to plug in and be like Cypher, that character in the Matrix that says, I know it's not real, I know it's all BS, but I just want my steak and wine, so I'm just going to play along. And for those that want to do that, great. But for me, like, I want to be a sovereign human being that is able to live a free life as God intended. And I know you are too. So, Gordy, any closing thoughts before we wrap up? And then I want to mention your book and tell people where to find you.
Yeah, I'd say my closing thoughts and invitation for everybody is, these next few years are going to be really important to connect to your spiritual essence.
Mm,
As this, world of exponential technology and artificial intelligence proliferates and the world gets more and more confusing, humans are going to be clamoring for a connection to their spirituality, whatever that means for you. And it's
yeah.
going to get harder and harder and harder. And I don't know if you've seen Chat GPT 4.0 yet, but it's insanely scary. It's literally like that movie Her. Like, you can now have a conversation with it, and so things are going to get more confusing. And I'll quickly just say that the decade of the 2000s was the year of physical awareness. So a lot of fad diets were coming online, like the Atkins and the Weight Watchers and all of that. And then the 2010s, after the global recession in 2008, was the decade of mental health awareness. So a lot of mental health awareness programs started coming out, and people became more aware of that. And then this decade, the 2020s, after the pandemic, really became around emotional awareness, and people starting to realize that, wow, I need to have more empathy, I need to have more compassion, and I need to look at my emotional body. And 2030 is going to be the decade of spiritual awareness. And so we're ahead of the curve right now. And my invitation is, really find what that means to you, and start connecting to your deeper self, connect to your soul, ask what your deeper self wants. What is that essence that's asking to be coming forth? Because it's just going to be harder and harder, and you deserve it, and you owe it to yourself.
Yeah. Amen. Gordy Bal, I appreciate you so much, man. I have a lot of love for you, brother.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I love you too. I'm so excited for us to continue this journey together.
Yeah, we are just getting started. If you're listening right now, I encourage you get Gordy's new book. It will blow your mind. Everything we talked about today and then some. I mean, he covers everything from gold, Bitcoin, mental, emotional, spiritual health, conscious thought revolution. I mean, you name it. And finding your purpose. There's a big part of the book that's on finding your purpose, and you walk through how to do that. And then I love, the biggest for me was really taking control of my thoughts. I think that was my biggest takeaway. In fact, I'm reading the bullet points here of what you're going to get from his book, The New Millionaire's Playbook. Unplug from the matrix, discover your purpose, measure your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, find your ultimate mission, build resilience, resources, and relationships, become a wealthy spiritual warrior, and expand your consciousness. The book is The New Millionaire's Playbook, 7 Keys to Unlock Freedom, Purpose, and Abundance, available where books are sold. And Gordy, anywhere good to connect with you online that you just point people to?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or go to my website, ctr.com. You can learn more there. And then you can learn about our fund as well. So if you're an entrepreneur who has a game-changing technology that's measurably raising consciousness, then reach out to me and we can see how we can support you.
I have one of those, man. So we're going to talk about that too. All right. Goal achievers and members of the Miracle Morning community, I love you so much. Thanks for listening today, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care, everybody.